I'm Shannon, and today I've got another book talk video to share with you guys. And today we're going to be talking about Little Cruelties by Liz Nugent. This is not the first Liz Nugent book I've reviewed on this channel. I also did Unraveling Oliver a few years ago, which I loved. So when I saw this one, I was excited to read and share it with you. So that's what we're going to do here today. I am currently struggling a bit with my tripod. One of the legs sometimes just starts getting shorter. So if at any point you see things slowly going sideways, that's what that is. Anyway, let's just jump on into the book. So much happens in this book that if you've been around my channel for a while, you know that with book talks, I like to kind of go point by point and go all the way through the book from beginning to end, giving spoilers, of course, before we talk about spoilers. But for this book, so much happens that I feel like we would be here for over an hour if I tried to go through every point, because this book for me was just kind of non-stop of things happening. So I'm just going to give you more of a general look. You're going. Do you see that? You're going. I'll get that sorted in the days to come, but for now we're just going to have to go with it. Anyway, so I'm going to give kind of a more general review, tell you a bit about some of the characters, and then you can decide if you would like to read it or not. So this book begins with a funeral. And it's the funeral of one of our main characters, but we don't know which one. The main characters are three brothers that grow up in Ireland during the 70s, 80s, 90s on through to the present. By the time we get to the end of the book, it's April 2019. And we've grown up with these three men. Their names are William, Luke, and Brian. Now I will say, the other book I read by Liz was Unraveling Oliver, like I mentioned, and that was more of a thriller to me, whereas this one's more of just a family dysfunction, which is one of my favorite genres to read, with a sort of the overhanging question mark of who is the brother that passes away. I will say that it kept me guessing up until the very chapter where it's revealed. I wasn't sure which one of them it was going to be, and in that final chapter, all three of them are there, so you're like, what's going to happen? Who's it going to be? I had my guess. My guess was wrong, and my guess wasn't really based on anything other than who I kind of hoped it would be based on these brothers, because here's the thing, none of them are overly likable. They're three men that are very damaged, very wounded, and in turn do very damaging and wounding things to other people, including each other. So you develop a sort of fondness for each of them because you're spending so much time with them, and that time begins when they're children. Because there's something about knowing someone, knowing what someone was like as a child, and the things that happened to them as they were growing up. There's just something about that that gets you right in the heart, and you have more of a soft spot for them than if you just met them as adults, at least for me. I thought that was a very smart thing for Liz to do, writing this book, was to include those parts from when they were children, because not only were they interesting to me, but it made you care about these men who were, in a lot of ways, very hard to care about. So we have Will. He's the eldest. He was kind of the mama's boy. He could do no wrong in her eyes. He was a film buff even as a kid, and he grew up to be a fairly major player in Irish filmmaking. He was a producer, not a director, because as he mentions a couple times throughout the book, directors are not the big guys, it's the producers. And so that's what he became, a film producer. He, as he becomes an adult, he's married to a woman named Susan, and but he's not faithful to her. He uses his position as sort of a film big shot to have affairs with many different women, from actresses to just women he works with in general, and he's not faithful at all. Next up we have Brian. Brian is, I think, the middle child. I was never sure if it was Brian or Luke. I'm sure it's mentioned, but I just don't remember. And Brian is kind of the, he's just kind of this guy that's kind of there, where his other brothers have big careers. Brian's just kind of trying to make it through. He works sometimes as a teacher. He teaches English in Paris to French kids. He eventually goes on to work for his brother Luke, and manipulates people. He manipulates his brother Luke to get what he wants. He is just a bad, I just get bad vibes from Brian all the time. He's the one that kind of, when his brothers are famous, he sells the stories to tabloids to make money off of exposing them. He uses people's misfortune to his advantage, which we'll hear more about when we talk about Luke. And he's just slimy overall. And as time goes on, we learn that he knew Susan, Will's wife, before Will did. And that's kind of a theme that runs through the other two brothers, is that Will gets what he wants. Will, the eldest, always gets what he wants, and he just sees what he wants and he takes it, and he doesn't care who's hurt. He just doesn't care. So that's Brian and Will. The final one is Luke. He's the one that I had the softest spot for. His whole life he really struggled with mental health, and then as he became an adult, also addiction. And we learn through the childhood flashbacks that he was the kid that was treated the worst by their mother. She made it very clear that she was not interested in Luke at all. And it's really weird. So as he grows up, he begins to suspect that perhaps he was the product of an assault or an affair or something that makes his mother unable to treat him the same way that she treats his brothers. So as a child, Luke's very religious. He's obsessed with like the Pope and religion and trying to make sure that everyone that he loves is okay and that their souls are saved and whatnot. Their mother was a performer and entertainer. She did a lot of stage work, a lot of singing, and their father is 15 years older than her, and so that dynamic was always a bit weird. And their mom was always very unhinged, not just in the ways that she would treat Luke, but in just many, many other kinds of ways. And when we were talking about Brian there, and when I said that he would manipulate anyone for anything during Luke's, so Luke, as a kid, he's very religious. He grows up and he becomes a very, very popular pop star, making records. Eventually he moves on to film, and he goes through stages. Sometimes he's sober and doing well. Sometimes he is actively in addiction, and his mental health is just a mess. And Brian takes advantage of those times when he's kind of out of his head with addiction, and like he gets Luke to give him his mansion, and he becomes Luke's manager eventually, and then instead of taking the normal percentage that a manager would take, he takes so much more, just knowing that because Luke is so out of it, he won't notice. And Luke has a hard time finding a lasting relationship. Eventually he does, early on when they're kind of adults, but say like the early 2000s, like 20 years ago, and I won't get into the spoilers on that one. But Will does something very awful to her, and the relationship ends up not lasting because, once again, Will is determined to always have his way. So those are the three brothers. The story is just so intricately woven that at first it's the book is kind of broken into three chunks, where the first is William's section, the second is Luke's, and then the third is Brian's. And then towards the end, the last 20 or 30 pages, we're quickly going back and forth between those 3 points of view. But in the first 3 sections, that's broken up into a a section for each brother. Once you get to the end of one brother's section, the next brother's section goes back to sort of the beginning, fills in all the details that we missed because we were only getting it from one brother's point of view. And so we get more information, more big picture information from the second brother's point of view. And then we're like, okay. And then the third brother's story comes and it goes back to the beginning. And then it sort of fills in all the missing pieces. And I just think so much planning had to have gone into this book that it's really just awe-inspiring. I'm always so impressed by writers who can weave stories like that. It's beautiful. And this book is, I really enjoyed it. So much happens that we're not going to go into here, just because, like I said, we'd be here forever. But if any of what I've said sounds enjoyable, if you like family dysfunction stories with a little bit of a mystery thrown in, you would love this. And it's just so good. It's so good. It kept me turning the pages. I was never bored. There were times when we'd go back in the past and I'd be like, okay, I've got enough of the past. I want to know what's happening right now. But that was just for me personally because I was so curious to see what was happening, what was going on, what we were missing. And I really, really enjoyed it. And I think you would too if you like family dysfunction stories. That's the best way for me to word it. But no, that these men are not overly likable. So if you're reading it, you're like, oh, I don't like him. You're not going to. None of them are ever really redeemed. If anything, the opposite. But Luke, for me, was the one that just really broke my heart the most. You know, Luke did bad things. He was into his addiction and whatnot, but most of the things that Luke would do were only detrimental to himself. He wasn't really out trying to hurt anybody else. Whereas I feel like the same can't be said for the other two. So, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I look forward to the next thing Liz Nugent puts out. All of her books, or both of these books that I've read by her, were excellent. Unraveling Oliver was excellent. I'll put a link in the description box to my book talk on that video if you'd be interested in hearing it. And yeah, that's going to do it for me for today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you guys again real soon. Bye.